So the growing economic impact of Biden's border crisis. A new report from the Center for Immigration Studies show nearly 3 in 5 illegal immigrants households are on taxpayer-funded welfare support. Steve Camarata is the research director at the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us now. So 60% of the folks that are coming here illegally are being supported by the taxpayer. So what happened to all of these folks saying they're giving to society?
Right. So what happens is very often illegal immigrants have U.S.-born children. Most illegal immigrant-headed households have a U.S.-born child, so they get the benefits on behalf of a U.S.-born child. The reason that they qualify is because they're so poor. And the reason they're poor is that most, but by no means all, illegal immigrants tend to have very modest levels of education, so they do work. This is not because they don't work. This is because they work, but they make very low income. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is if you work but make low income, you qualify for everything from food stamps to free school lunch to the WIC program to public housing to the earned income tax credit. So working doesn't preclude welfare use. And what we're seeing is a lot of illegal immigrants do find jobs, but they're poor, and so they, and often their children, qualify for these programs.
Steve, it shouldn't be a surprise to us, though. These folks are coming to the country illegally, so they don't have the proper documentation. Many of them don't speak English, and many of them are paid under the table. And the reason why they're paid under the table is because it's cheap labor. Americans wouldn't do those jobs, but they want a fair wage. These people they're on a slave-based labor system where no one reasonable person would take those jobs for that pay, right?
Well, that certainly happens. And just by their presence here, they tend to lower wages because they're increasing the supply of workers at the bottom end of the labor market. However, the difference between what happens when illegal immigrants have work authorization and don't isn't enormous if the illegal immigrant themselves has very modest skills, and that's often very true. So again, yes, it's true that when they work off the books, sometimes they work for less. But it's really the case that they're just very modestly educated. And that's one of the main reasons they use so much welfare. And because they're poor, many states like New York and California step in and cover illegal immigrants with welfare programs, too. And that's what we're picking up partly in the study as well. So it isn't just the presence of the children, but it's the political pressure because you have all these poor people in your state.
So, Steve, you've been tracking this, and I know you're just a researcher. Do you see any appetite in Congress to get something done? Because there's a magnet. If you're looking at this program or these programs and you're saying, look, 60% of us have a shot of being on this, you'll keep coming to the country.
Right. There has to be some effect for this, right? However, I do think it's fair to say most illegal immigrants come to America not so much to get welfare, but to work. But they have children, they struggle, and then turn to the American taxpayer for support. It's going to be very hard once you've let people in, so many of them with modest education and low income, not to end up having them use these programs because, as is the case, we give automatic citizenship to their U.S.-born children. You either enforce the law and don't have so many illegal immigrants and reduce the problem, or you accept the cost if you're going to be letting a lot of unskilled people into your country.
What a novel idea, Steve. Just enforce the law. I hope they're watching. We appreciate you breaking down the numbers with us.
Thanks for having me.
You got it, Steve.
Greg Abbott is once again challenging federal authorities on the border. He's saying Texas has a right to self-defense because he believes the federal government is not doing enough.
Most incumbents don't lose elections. They get fired, and they get fired because they're doing a bad job. As you talked about, the immigration system and the border issue is the primary issue in America right now.
The Supreme Court is siding with President Biden in a dispute with Texas over the border.
A Supreme Court ruling is giving the federal government more flexibility here at the southern border. The justices ruling Monday that Border Patrol can cut and remove about 30 miles of razor wire installed along the Rio Grande by the state of Texas, escalating a political battle between President Biden and Texas Governor Greg Abbott.
Texas National Guard soldiers putting up more razor wire in Eagle Pass to increase border security, despite the federal government allowing border agents to remove or cut that wire.
Listen, I'm proud of the great state of Texas. I'm proud of our governor. I'm proud of our state legislature because they're stepping up and defending our state from invasion. Listen, the mayor of a bunch of blue cities, the governors of a bunch of blue states have declared illegal immigration emergencies in their states. That's true in New York. That's true in Boston. That's true in Massachusetts. That's true in Chicago. That's true in L.A. Eric Adams, the liberal Democrat in New York, has said illegal immigration is destroying New York City. That's 110,000 people are destroying New York City. I agree with him. But if 110,000 people are destroying New York City, what the hell do you think 9.6 million people are doing to Texas and the other states on the southern border? And so Texas is stepping up to defend our state. I'm glad we are. But the reason Texas is doing so is because Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats affirmatively want this invasion. By the way, you want to know why negotiating with these guys, why they're doing it in such bad faith? They are today, as you pointed out. Joe Biden is litigating against the state of Texas to try to stop Texas from securing the border. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is the greatest friend the Mexican drug cartels have ever had. He is the greatest financial benefactor the Mexican drug cartels have ever had. He is the single largest human trafficker in history. Now, that may sound like hyperbole, but those 9.6 million people, when they come over and turn themselves in, they tell the Border Patrol agents, I want to go to the following city, and they pick a city. And Joe Biden puts them on planes and puts them on buses and sends them to every city in America, and Joe Biden is the last mile of the human trafficking network. So, yes, Biden is fighting ferociously to stop Texas from defending ourselves. He is wrong.
We need to let Greg Abbott do his job, which is to put up the razor wire. I stand with Texas. We've got to secure this border.
And with those crossings at an all-time high, the Biden administration is putting a greater focus on border security, claiming the president wants to do more, but it's up to Congress to appropriate funding. At the same time, the White House is also pushing for big changes to the immigration system.
He's asking for more resources, and he wants to see additional resources, but also changes to policy to address what we've been seeing at the border.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say they're close to a deal on a new bill that would include significant funds for border security, but it would also increase the number of migrants allowed to cross legally, a sticking point for some Republicans.
I'm not for just having 1.8 million people come across the border. I think there are national security problems with that.
Governor Abbott and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton say they will continue fighting in court to keep the razor wire up.
So it was the states that created the United States, and when the states voted to create the United States and have a constitution, included in that agreement was the compact that the federal government would take care of the states. And Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution speaks to that and says that if the federal government does not take care of the states, then the states are in danger, we can ask the federal government to live up to its obligation. Then the authors of the Constitution knew there would be times when the federal government would not live up to its duty. And so they empowered states in Article 1, Section 10, the right of self-defense. And what Texas is asserting is our Article 1, Section 10 right of self-defense, because the President of the United States is not fulfilling his duty to enforce the laws passed by Congress that deny illegal entry into the United States.
Governor, will you instruct your officers to physically prevent federal officers from accessing that part of the border?
So what Texas is doing is just very simple. And that is because the Biden administration has really, truly abdicated its responsibility to secure the border and enforce the laws. Texas very simply is securing the border. And so we put up the razor wire that you were talking about, Bill, and we put up all these barricades that actually have denied illegal entry. And as you pointed out also in that screen, there are criminals coming across our border. Texas has a right as a state to stop criminals from coming into our state, to make arrests of those criminals. And we have National Guard as well as Texas Department of Public Safety officers who are there to make those arrests and to deny illegal entry. And Joe Biden actually does have an option here. Joe Biden's option is to enforce the laws of the United States and stop this illegal entry.
Doesn't look like they're going to do that. Listen to Karine Jean-Pierre. This is what she said about you yesterday. It's unfortunate that there is a governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, who has politicized this issue of what's happening on the border. And it's not making people's lives safer. It's actually making it harder for law enforcement at the border to do their job.
She just said that this morning. How do you respond?
Well, obviously, it's a very uninformed comment on her part. There's really only one person in America not doing their job, and that's the president of the United States, who's not enforcing immigration laws. Also, as she has already been called out, and the president and other Democrats and media, they have cast a false narrative about some people dying on the border that apparently Texas denied Border Patrol access to. That's been completely debunked. The only thing that the spokesperson for Biden can do is to cast aspersions and lies, hoping that people will believe them. Because the truth of the matter is, what Texas is doing is what Americans expect to be done. Americans expect the border to be secured. Because Joe Biden has abandoned that responsibility, Texas is stepping up and doing it with all that razor wire that you're showing right now.
Mm-hmm. And you've committed to putting up more razor wire, where the U.S. Supreme Court just a few days ago said that the feds are allowed to cut through the wire that you've been watching yourself for a couple years now. And just to go back to your first answer that you mentioned there, this was your statement yesterday. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now.
What is clear is that Joe Biden has, from the time he took office, actually during the time that he was campaigning, he had no intent to secure the border. He talked about open border policies during the campaign, and now he's allowed open border policies with candidly most Americans not even knowing what that meant. But now the people in New York knows what it means. Now the people in Chicago knows what it means. People across the country are having to experience what open borders mean. Bill, I'll tell you this. Most incumbents don't lose elections. They get fired, and they get fired because they're doing a bad job. As you talked about, the immigration system and the border issue is the primary issue in America right now. This is an issue upon which Joe Biden gets a grade of F and deserves to be fired.